So good afternoon and welcome to Back to Business Pennsylvania's second bipartisan dialogue titled Searching for Common Ground on Election Integrity. My name is Doug and I'm Business for America's Pennsylvania Policy Director. We're really excited to host Pennsylvania State Representatives Seth Grove and Scott Conklin for a robust conversation this afternoon. The goal of this dialogue is to explore consensus on issues related to election reform, voting access, and the impact on Pennsylvania businesses and their employees. I'll first tell you a bit about Business for America and our Back to Business PA campaign. So we are a nonprofit, nonpartisan coalition of businesses advocating for pro-democracy initiatives and civic engagement. In PA, we are mobilizing the business community to get engaged in election reform and election security discussions. The businesses we work with want their elected representatives to reach bipartisan compromise to improve election administration and make it more secure while increasing access to the ballot. Pennsylvania businesses and their employees are better off when their employees have more access to the ballot through election modernizations like ballot boxes and mail voting. Business for America partners with the West Philadelphia Corridor Collaborative on this joint initiative Back to Business PA. I'll quickly go through the run of show for everyone. First, I'm going to do very short bios for our panelists and our moderators today. Next, our moderators will lead the representatives through 3 questions where they will each have approximately 3 minutes to respond and provide remarks. Finally, for the last 10 or so minutes, we will take questions from the audience. For the questions at the end, there is a Q&A function at the bottom of your Zoom window. So please feel free to click on that and then enter in questions and we can try to get to those at the end. So we'll move on to bios now. Our first panelist today is Representative Seth Grove. He serves Pennsylvania's 196th district, which is in York County. Rep. Grove serves as the chairman of the Pennsylvania House State Government Committee, where he is primary legislative authority over the Commonwealth's elections. Representative Grove was elected in 2008. Thank you for being with us today, Representative Grove.
Thanks for having me.
Our next panelist is Representative Scott Conklin, representing Pennsylvania's 77th district, which is in Center County. Rep. Conklin serves as the Democratic chair of the same committee, the Pennsylvania House State Government Committee, and leads policy on elections. Rep. Conklin was elected in 2006. Thank you, Representative, for being with us here today.
Pleasure.
Now our moderators. Our first is Jabari Jones, who is my colleague in Back to Business Pennsylvania. He is the president of the West Philadelphia Corridor Collaborative. He's serving as a co-moderator. Jabari's organization represents over 2,000 businesses in West Philadelphia, and he leads its advocacy, business representation, and grant funding work for their members. And then next, our second co-moderator is Jeff Brown. He's the president of Brown Superstores. Brown Superstores operates 12 supermarkets in the Philadelphia area. Jeff is also a civic and community leader in Southeastern Pennsylvania. Thank you for being with us today, Jabari and Jeff.
Thanks for having us.
So as a business coalition, we can't do this work without our business partners. I'd like to thank the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry and the Chamber of Business and Industry of Center County for co-hosting this event. I'd also like to thank the Committee of 70 and the Pennsylvania League of Women Voters for serving as co-hosts. So that's enough for introductions and an overview. I will turn it over to my colleague Jabari.
Hey everybody, thank you so much for everybody who's taking the time out to join us. One of the things that I've consistently said in a lot of the marketing and promotion for this event is that part of this campaign that I really enjoy is the ability to have these conversations with representatives across PA about some of the major issues that are facing our Commonwealth and seeing if we can search for some common ground amongst folks that may have different perspectives and different party affiliations and ideologies. So I'm happy to be here. I'm thankful to everybody else who has come out and joined. And now I will pass it over to my co-moderator, Jeff Brown, for some opening remarks.
Thank you, Jabari. And as was said, I'm a local grocer. Started as a small business person and built my business in Philadelphia. And I'm a believer in our democracy and all that it has to offer. Our opportunity to vote and that vote to be accurately counted is sacred aspect of our democracy. I look forward to a healthy bipartisan discussion today about how we can protect the easy access and accuracy of our elections. So my first question, many of my grocery stores are in inner city communities of Philadelphia. My employees and customers have expressed concerns to me about their voices being heard in Harrisburg, and they have a fear that the ability and ease of vote will be taken away from them. My business has joined the Time to Vote, an initiative to make sure that employees of businesses give their employees the necessary time to vote. What additional support can business leaders provide to ensure the outcome of this discussion in Harrisburg results in a fair and productive outcome? And let's start out with Representative Conklin.
The easiest answer is exactly what you're doing today. You're reaching out and you're talking to legislators from across the state. I can tell you each legislative district is a little bit different from the others. So the point of view of that legislator will be that point of view of their district or the majority of the constituents. For myself, I come from State College area, Penn State University, Center County, very academic, very in tune with the facts. The folks in my district really don't want to hear what you think or what your feelings are about. They want to know exactly what the facts are. So for myself, I actually chaired the election board for 7 years. I actually had to go through the Shore systems, all the new voting machines. I actually had to set up an election day event. So I look at it a little bit differently than many of my colleagues do. But the most important thing that we can do is have a frank, honest conversation. Just basically sit on facts and not what we feel a perception of something may be. And I believe by doing so, we can talk across the aisle. My co-chair, Seth Grove, and I get along very well. He's a very good individual himself for the point of view he's going to bring forward. But I think what we have to do as legislators, we have to respect that point of view and try to work with him, even as much as we may disagree with it. But most of all, we have to work with the business community and those individuals that make up that community. And those are the constituents that shop your grocery store or shop the other businesses within that region of where you're located.
And Representative Grove?
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. Appreciate the opportunity to always discuss election issues here in the great Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Huge shout out to my co-chair there, Scott Conklin. He's a great guy. I enjoy working with him on numerous issues. He definitely brings some levity to the committee. So I greatly appreciate him and his staff and being able to work with them. I think it's important for everyone to talk about elections and democracy and how we access voting and how we actually participate in voting. I think it's critically important from all angles to have that open and fair discussion about processes and how it all operates. And, businesses participating today is a great step in doing that. So I always look forward to the discussion. Look forward to working with all stakeholders to make voting, simply easy to vote and hard to cheat.
Thank you, guys. And so I'll follow up a little bit on that. Say that our business community has broadly believed that all eligible Pennsylvania voters who want to vote should be able to do so easily. And when neighbors, employees, and communities participate in democracy, there's a public trust in our system of government that improves. We believe that a stable and trusted government is also better for the business community. There's so many great innovations that came in the previous 2 years that have made it easier for individuals to vote in PA. What measures do you think or are currently considering that the legislature can take to improve access to the ballot for all Pennsylvanians? Now we'll start that with Grove.
All right, thank you. Appreciate it. Great question. After the 2020 election, there was a lot. There was just a lot in that election. Lot of discussions, a lot of different points of views about how that election ended. We saw something similar in the 2016 election. So both major parties had great concern with the outcome of two major presidential elections. And for the life of me, I always say this, I wish more people voted in off-year municipal elections because those elections have a greater impact on individual lives than the President of the United States. But for some reason, we focus on that big office sitting in the Oval Office rather than all those critically important school board races, county commissioner races, local township races that happen every single day in those off-year elections. But obviously, we had issues in two major elections of people questioning the outcome of an election. So coming into the 2021-2022 session, I wanted to make sure we had a better understanding of how elections operate and what our election laws actually are. So we did 10 extensive oversight hearings, worked well with or prioritized elections directors at most of those hearings, stakeholder groups, experts from other states, other election officials from other states, and basically said, what is, and our Department of State, actually, we joke with Jonathan Martz, he's the Deputy Secretary for Elections in the Commonwealth. He's probably testified more than anybody in front of the House State Government Committee. So we joke about giving him a little t-shirt participation trophy. So we did the deep dive into actually how our laws, not what emails say, not what other states are doing, but what actually is transpiring every single day in Pennsylvania as elections directors prepare and operate elections. Through that, we learned a lot. And through that learning, we put out a comprehensive bill, House Bill 1300, to do numerous items. Number one, modernize an old antiquated system that dates back to 1937 to expand access in numerous fronts, from in-person early voting to curbside voting to just trying to help disabled individuals vote, because we had laws from 1937. They really didn't anticipate or envision helping disabled individuals vote. So we want to make sure we had full accessibility. And three, making sure that every single process within the election system is actually secure and ensures that only legal voters are able to access it, and making sure that we have the proper kind of internal controls to make sure that happens. And finally, kind of wrapping it up, making sure that at the end of the day, we had the right post-election processes in place to make sure there is no question about who wins elections moving forward, and make sure that we fund and help elections directors and county election boards actually operate elections too. So it was a big bill trying to take care of those numerous things simultaneously.
Oh, I wanted to give Conklin a chance to answer the same question. Sorry.
Thank you. You know, you'd be surprised to hear this, but one of the things that surprised folks is that I actually voted no to Act 77. And you would think that someone such as myself, who is pushing every day for early voting, more access, drop boxes across the board, you would find that hard to believe. Well, the reason I voted no for it, ironically, was for the reason why it was used politically. One of my concerns is that, or the biggest concern I had with Act 77 is the reason it caught us into what some people would say a misunderstanding of the election process, is that it left a lot of things open-ended, and the Supreme Court had to do their job and stepped in at the end of the day to clarify that. What we're hoping for going forward is that we can come up with a consensus. First off, the biggest problem we had on early voting is that the counties couldn't do early canvassing, nor did they have the funding in place to be able to do that early canvassing. That's where they open up the ballots, put them in first. So across the state, you saw a large variety of uses. Now, a vote's a vote. It doesn't matter whether you cast it, early, or whether you cast it at precinct 72. That vote is still a constituent that's well documented. So on election day last year, you had folks in Center counties, and again, I'm going to brag on the county because we do have 3 very good commissioners, very in tune with what's going on. They understood that there was going to be a lot of questions asked because people started making, not in Pennsylvania, but folks running for higher office began saying that there was going to be something wrong with the system before it even started. So it already started that degree of mistrust between individuals. So what my county did is that they actually put together basically a war room first thing in the morning. They had folks there, Republican, Democrat, opening up the ballots, getting them ready. The very first drop after 7 o'clock was the early votes itself. Other counties, though, took a different approach. They didn't do those early votes till up to a day, 2 days, even 3 days later. So it gave that illusion that votes were being found someplace, which was not occurring, but it gave that illusion that it was happening. And people jumped on that. So what we've tried to do since then is that people have a different take. of how we can correct the problem. I put out one election bill, but I just recently was with the County Commissioners Association. They had their statewide their statewide meeting. We were able to sit down and we met, and I asked them, what's the 2 things you want? What do you need most to make this system work? Now, remember, the county commissioners are the ones that do the election, 100%. They do every nut and bolt of that election in the county. The 2 things they're asking for is early canvassing and funding. So I'll be putting out a bill just to basically, let's not fight about all the other things that we can fight about, but let's put a bill together to give the county commissioners what they need to make that election process. One of the things that I'm most proud of is that elections are held in communities. And I don't believe a lot of people understand that when you walk into that precinct, there's a Republican and a Democrat. When you write your name, when you walk in, they'll call Scott Conklin. There's a Republican representative, a Democratic representative. And if somebody doubts it's me, then at that point they can say, wait a minute, it's not you. The Republican, I'm a Democrat, who's overseeing can say, that's not Scott Conklin. I can fill out a provisional ballot. They can put it off to the side. They can send it to the courthouse. Folks who do our early voting have to show their driver's license number or another process. But the biggest thing we have to do is not to put so much distrust in our election system, because Russia itself could not make what's happening today any worse. The finest thread we have is democracy itself, and the election system is the backbone of it. So that's one of the reasons why we have to work together, and myself and many of my colleagues are, including my co-chair, to come up with a way that we can make it not only work more efficiently, but not take away the voting rights of people, and at the same time making them see that it is a transparent system.
Thank you. The citizens of PA deserve a secure and accurate election. Voter fraud is extremely rare, but fear will reduce the trust in the system. What protections can we put in place to prevent fraud so we can sustain public trust in our elections? Let's start out with Rep. Conklin.
One of the things when you look at the voting system itself, it's evolved many times over the years. I mean, the date Tuesday was only put there because when we first started voting, folks would leave after church and take them 2 days to get to the courthouse. Tuesday was the perfect day, taking a couple days to get home, and then they get back to work. One of the things as we're looking at going forward with it, I believe there are compromises we can make. There was almost, as you well said, no voter fraud, almost none whatsoever. The system held up very, very well this last election. And those cases that people brought up as voter fraud were debunked fairly quickly, such as Montgomery County. They have a video of a woman putting 8 ballots in. They checked those ballots and find out that all those ballots had affidavit from an individual with needs. You hear people talking about there were no fingerprints on a ballot. I have no idea who's fingerprinting ballots, but those type of things going on adds a lot of misinformation. I believe there is common ground that we could come to, though. And you can look at folks, I think it's North Carolina, has a very simple voter ID law. But again, today, and I bring this up all the time, you can go to the courthouse, get the name of every individual who voted and their address, and you can check to make sure that they are valid individuals that voted. And every political operative has already done that. But I believe there is some common ground we can work on. But the biggest thing we have to do as elected officials is not spew the distrust from individuals' theories, but actually look at the process itself.
Representative Grove.
Thanks. Yeah, I think there's a lot of things we can do. Number one, Scott and I actually just introduced a bill. We moved out of committee this week to help try to clean up our voter rolls. We heard from Department of State that they don't have access to ERIC, which is a national organization to help states compare voter lists, to clean it up, get rid of target double voting, see who's registered in different states, and they connect with deceased individuals. So we move forward on that legislation, slated to vote when we get back into session at the end of April to help clean up our voter list. It's a critically important tool. When you have clean lists, you can have clean elections. But even prior to that, in our election hearings, we heard that counties actually didn't have to validate voter registration forms before adding individuals on voter rolls. We think it's critically important to do that because, again, we only want legal voters. If you're legally allowed to vote, you should have full access to the system. So making sure that's checked. Scott mentioned voter identification. It's used in multiple states. Actually increases voter turnout after elections. Texas just did big changes in their election system. They had the most voters in a off-year election ever after that law was passed. So those are the type of things we're looking to do. Make sure we have proper internal controls. After the 2016 election, we were sued by Green candidate Jill Stein. That's why we have new election machines and paper ballots in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. But there is another provision that is being worked on, and that's the post-election audit process. And I think we need a far better post-election audit process and data as well. Department of State needs to do a better job of getting information out. Here's a great example. In the 2021 primary election, a few days after the election day, there was some negative votes, and it was a large chunk of negative votes. So people were looking at that and thinking, oh, why do we have negative votes happening, right? So we called the Department of State and asked what's going on. Well, Montgomery County submitted a double batch of votes that Department of State picked up, and they moved them back. The problem is there's no public disclosure of that happening. And that leads people to question the outcome of elections. So part of the legislation we put forward was to make sure there was a notification. If there's any changes after an election, pinpoint it and make sure there's a public disclosure of that. Those type of things help tremendously moving forward. Ballot boxes. We have videos of individuals stuffing multiple ballots in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Is it fraud? It's definitely illegal voting. It is currently illegal to submit more than one ballot in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. State law requires that any ballot past one is sequestered and is not counted. It is an illegal vote. Those are the type of things that occur. It's illegal to do that. Unfortunately, Governor Wolf is probably a headliner of doing that himself. But again, I think it's a reasonable understanding that happens every day. If you have a spouse, you probably go to your spouse and say, hey, I know you're running to the store. Can you drop this off, my dry cleaning off, right? That is a conversation that happens every day in America. So having a spouse drop off the ballot for, I think, the average citizen would mean, hey, can you just drop this off? I know you're heading in to drop off your ballot. Happens. We understand that, and we put a provision in legislation that the governor ended up vetoing to allow that transaction to happen, that you can hand in a ballot from an individual. But you need people sitting outside those drop boxes to make sure that nothing nefarious happens. A video camera itself does not do it. You can check afterwards, but once ballots are in the system, you cannot pull them back out. So in order to make sure you have clean and fair elections, you need to make sure you have poll workers and election officials at these sites, wherever voting is happening. You need to make sure you have individuals there checking these ballots. Number one, to make sure they're done right? So you want to make sure everything's filled out right and it cures. So it helps voters make sure their votes count on the front end. Two, making sure that there's aren't mistakes, or you're making sure that legal voters are participating in the system. So those are the type of things we want to see. Data is critically important. Good data, because there's a lot of bad election data out there. So we want to make sure we have systems in place that make sure we have good, solid data, that at the end of the day, doesn't matter who wins or loses, people accept those outcomes.
I want to ask a question. I don't know if that was where that interference is coming from. I wanted to ask a question that came from one of our attendees. And I asked a question about the recent bill that passed in the House that bars private funding to election systems. It's a very controversial piece of legislation that, there have been a lot of people that have commented on, especially certain counties that have been underfunded and don't have the resources that are necessary to properly run elections, especially when variables like the COVID-19 pandemic, occur. There are times when those counties don't have the proper funding that they need to be able to administer elections. And people are afraid that not allowing the private sector or the foundation sector to step in and fill those gaps is a disservice to voters. Is there a path through the General Assembly for adequate public funding, new public funding to counties to administer elections? And why hasn't this happened yet after we see this problem occur cycle after cycle? I'm going to start with Rep. Grove.
Yeah, so the Senate passed a bill this past week. Also, the House did pass a bill to the Senate. So we have two bills that basically stop third-party funding of election offices, either Department of State or county elections offices. Here in Pennsylvania, we saw some manipulation of that between the Department of State prioritizing counties with a certain party affiliation over others, and to where that money was driven out to. I will always conclude that large populous counties will always get more money than smaller counties, but it shouldn't be disproportional, and small counties should not be cut out of that system. So we put forward legislation to basically end that. We also put forward, and again, House Bill 1300 and House Bill 1800, which is now on the House floor, that provided $117 million of election funding, both reoccurring, helping counties administer elections through reimbursements, and to help them afford election machines and other election equipment moving forward. We know we just got new election machines. We also know those election machines have a lifespan, so we want to make sure we put in place policies that continue to invest and support election machines. If you don't have the machines, you don't have an election. So we understand that we have to put money into elections. Right now, basically the only money heading into elections outside of local taxpayer money at the county level is federal dollars heading into the system. I actually just looked at status of appropriations on the budget website, and there's still $40 million of unspent election dollars dating back to 2019 that hasn't been used by county election offices. So hopefully we can get that out to the counties this fiscal year to help with this kind of large election happening in Pennsylvania. So I think it's critically important we put funding into it. We support that funding. And again, we put $117 million into the election system. And we think it should be government run, government operated, and shouldn't be attempted to be manipulated by third-party groups using money to specifically direct election officials on how they should run their elections.
Rep. Conklin, your thoughts? And do you think that the money that has been appropriated by the state, is that enough for funding elections?
No, I think what we could get together, again, there's one, I say, let's take those things that we agree on. One of the things we agree on is that the counties need more money. We have to put more money into the election system. If we would run cleaner bills, we'd be able to get that money. As far as those third-party groups, the Legal Win Voters and other groups that have funded education programs, I voted no to the bill because there's no place where it shows that that there was any type of misinformation, underhanded things done. But what it did give, it gave a good education process. I mean, I guess we could go down that road and say that, the Republican Party, the Democratic Party, push an agenda, heavily to get their voters out. But that is okay because they're part of that. They're part of that. Please forgive my sarcasm. Part of what the political process is. But those third parties that have come in, that money was offered out. Many counties, my counties, southeastern counties, some counties out west, use those groups, use that money for just for the voter education. Now, as much as we can disagree back and forth on that, what we can all agree on again is let's go back to the fact that let's just run some clean bills that we can do that funding just for the election system. And then we can go back and we can look at the other nuts and bolts that we may disagree on, and hopefully we can come up with a good compromise.
Jabari, I don't know if you want to ask questions, but while you're looking at the list, I wanted to mention that I've taken advantage of mail-in voting. I find it very convenient. I don't have to wait in line to vote. And is there any chance of a standalone bill to permanently allow mail-in voting? And can the counties count the votes in advance so we don't have to wait to see how the election turned out? And we'll start out with Representative Grove.
Yeah. Right now, any legislation dealing with Act 77 is put on hold because of we have a court case at the Supreme Court. So once that is decided, we'll see about moving anything dealing with mail-in voting or Act 77 forward. So we're basically not going to do anything, and I anticipate probably not until after the primary election for that legislation to go through. And people do like, I think, mail-in voting. They find it convenient. I've said many times my parents use it. My dad's not capable of standing in line, but actually, ironically, the largest disenfranchisement of voters in any state is actually long lines. It turns people away all the time. You have kids that need to get places, work, the whole 9 yards. It's hard for people to vote and wait, and people just don't want to wait in line to go vote. So it's a huge disenfranchisement. It turns people away every single election cycle. And that's something we definitely need to fix. And there's ways to do that. E-poll books to make it more convenient, requiring counties to look at wait times and readjust polling places and get proper training for poll workers to make sure they emphasize getting people through the lines. Providing stuff like curbside voting to help disabled people get through the lines and not have to wait. So there's a lot of stuff we can do and a lot of stuff that was built into House Bill 1300 to address. But I don't know the fate of mail-in voting. I suspect the Supreme Court will keep it, but we'll see when they make their final determination, and then we'll have to go from there on policy.
Rep. Conklin.
Again, that's one of the areas we agree on across the aisles, that folks standing in line is a deterrent. It actually keeps people from voting. The bill I was talking about earlier that I'll be putting in soon is actually what the county commissioners asked for. That's the 15-day pre-canvassing, allowing those votes to be put in the pipeline, not counted before election day, but you'll be able to get them ready to go. That the very first drop after the elections close will be those early ballots. I think that would go a long way. I can tell you, in the counties that did that early voting first, and it was a lot of work. It took a lot of maneuvering by the county commissioners to be able to do that. Those counties, you had no questions of the outcome whatsoever. There were none. The counties that did not have the resources, or for reasons that things happened, that counted them multiple days later, that's where the questions came from. And if we want to eliminate those questions, we'll have that opportunity that we can just pass some things that are, make it easier for folks to vote, things that we can all agree on. I believe the early canvassing, that being able to count those ballots early, get them in the pipeline to be able to be counted as soon as the polls close, probably, if not one of the biggest thing that we could do to help out the counties on election day.
Great. I'm going to ask another question from our audience about voter ID requirements, and that's been something that's been another thing that's been very controversial when it comes to elections. So in the past, the Republican Party has pushed for voter ID, and the Democrats have typically opposed voter ID requirements. There's already, as it was mentioned, a requirement to show a form of ID the first time you vote in a precinct. So have both parties thought about a compromise that would expand that requirement to each election that would meet the constitutional requirement and add an extra layer of security? I'll start with Rep. Conklin.
Thank you. That's a great question. I think we have to. I mean, I'll be bold about this. I think some of the voters' bills across the state that have been mentioned, whether it's Florida, some of the things that have been asked to put out, I think actually deter folks of different neighborhoods from going out and vote. It's almost as though it's done purposely, but I think there's a compromise. Again, I want to go back to the voting process itself, that you have to show an ID when you register to vote. And when you walk into a precinct, there are two people standing there. When you walk in, they say your name, both people agree that it's you, and then you go and vote. If there's any questioning about it, it would take people of both parties to be able, one of the two parties would have to say it's not right, or if they thought somebody was doing fraud, if they didn't recognize you. And that's why it's so important to have local people there, is that they recognize that. But if there's any question, they can do the provisional ballot and be checked on later. But I do believe that if we sit down, we can come up with a compromise, not something as stringent as other states have done, But there, again, I brought up the, I believe it's North Carolina. Please forgive me if someone breaks it at South Carolina. I apologize for it. But it is an extra layer, but it doesn't inconvenience the voter and doesn't make individuals who live in a certain zip code that it would affect much more greatly or much more than somebody that lives in a more rural part. It would still give them the feeling that their rights of privacy are being abided to, but at the same time, give that little bit of extras that some folks are asking for without making it so stringent that it causes an election day problem.
Yeah, I would concur. I definitely think there's room to negotiate all these. There is an absolute sweet spot for election policies in the Commonwealth and across the country. Voter ID it's a known entity. Actually, it helps. Talk about a business model. And Jeff, like, think about all the stuff you need an ID for in a grocery store. If you want to get Sudafed, you need an ID, right? So there's so much that you need ID for. It helps individuals get into the actual economy. Bank accounts, you need an ID. So it's critically important, not only for voting, but for just participating in the economy in our society to have some form of ID today. I know we just helped a gentleman. He was a homeless vet staying with a constituent, didn't have an ID. You know, we sent him to PennDOT. You can get a homeless ID. It was pretty easy to get. And he had an ID in matter of, the wait time at PennDOT, which sometimes can be a little longer than others. But I mean, it was pretty easy for him to go get an ID. Our provisions that we're looking at are pretty easy. You know, it's your prototypical government photo ID. Everybody has a voter registration card, at least I do. I don't know how many people actually keep their printed voter ID card. But had the thought of idea, what if we do a QR code, make it, laminate it, kind of makes it like, Jeff, like your cards that your bonus cards for your store, right? Everybody has them in your wallet. You scan it, you go. We're going to be moving to e-polling books. Like, I think that's pretty much a given. Everyone's going to go to that. I don't think Scott would disagree with that. They have the ability to actually scan your driver's license, swipe, all your information gets popped up. They print out your ballot and you can go vote. Florida, other states use that for early voting at their vote centers. It makes it very easy and convenient to move people through the lines, but you need an ID to do that. Whether it's a driver's license, whether it's a passport, whether it's a free ID that Department of State should be providing, whether it's simply your voter registration card with that QR code that you can scan in. Those are the type of things that help you verify who you are, bring trust in the election, and move people through those lines a lot faster. And you have a little less reliance on poll workers, and makes it a little convenient, a little easier for them as well. So I think the middle ground's there. I think use of technology and the direction we're going to be going in Pennsylvania, it just makes sense.
I think we have a few minutes left. We have time for another question, or are there?
I think we can. We might be able to sneak one last one in here, Jeff.
Okay. It seems like counties from across the Commonwealth have had some confusion about the rules, and I know the media has covered that counties do things a little differently. Is there a path for a bipartisan legislation to standardize how we handle our elections? And let's start out. Yeah, Representative Grove.
Okay. So I absolutely believe. So when you look at anything, you have to go back to the Constitution. Our state constitution has an entire article on elections. One of those actually deals with uniformity in elections. So both your voter registration, your election processes have to be uniform across all counties within the state. If you are a voter in Philadelphia, you should be treated the exact same way as if you're a voter in Forest County. There should be no differences. And unfortunately, we do have some counties that want to make up their own rules and run elections their own way. We've had to push back on some of those counties. Unfortunately, we've had to relitigate some previous litigation because of some counties doing stuff. We have an issue right now in Montgomery County where the Board of Elections there wants to redetermine what one household is. They want to say entire nursing home is one household versus another, or one person or one household for handing in ballots. So we need clarification. A lot of states have a manual that they put together before every election, and every elections director, every poll director, they all have the same manual on how to run elections. We need to establish that. It's something we have proposed to do moving forward, where we have this election law advisory board made up of county elections directors from across the state, have them design an elections manual, and we have a standardized process through the entire county. What does that do? That allows us to train to those standards. That also allows us to hold individuals accountable to those standards. So it's critically important we have a baseline understanding. We heard from Department of State, they're even looking at doing this. They've heard loud and clear from the counties the desire to have that standardization. And I think it's critically important. Other states are doing it. It seems to work very well. And again, you both bring in assistance, standardization, uniformity, and accountability, all moving forward.
And your thoughts, Rep Conklin?
I can tell you 99 and 9/10 of the time the counties are doing a great job. There's always that there's always that part that's not clear, and that's not clear. Basically, when I start out talking about Act 77. Act 77 left so much that wasn't clear. It caused confusions within the county. Now the county still did a great job. One of the things that we have to do anytime we come together, again, I come from this from a different point of view, because running those elections, I can tell you I've actually gone to the hospital and voted people on election day. I can tell you I found voter fraud when I oversaw it. The gentleman voted twice. We caught it that night. The system's pretty well intact. We do have to give that clarity from the legislative body, but at the same time, we still have to give that flexibility within the counties. Again, all counties are not the same. You have Elk County that has a small amount of people voting. You have Philadelphia County that has millions of people living there that are able to vote. So as much as we can try to get that one size is perfect, we need to give that clarity. I agree with that, but we still have to give some of that flexibility within the counties to be able to do things. Again, for instance, on 2000, Obama's first time he ran, some of our precincts were so overrun that I literally had to split the book in half and actually swear people in that evening to get the lines moving. So that we need to make sure that flexibility is left in place. We have to make sure that it's able to go, but at the same time, again, that's something we can agree on. There is some unclear parts about the election law that I believe we can straighten up and we can make it more defined for counties to understand, but at the same time, still give that flexibility within it as well to make those counties be able to operate on election day.
Thank you, guys. And I want to thank, I think there was definitely some common ground that we found throughout this session today. And I think this was a really awesome discussion. I want to thank both of our state reps for joining us. And of course, my co-moderator, Mr. Jeff Brown over there. This was awesome. We definitely got to do this again. I want to make sure that we're respectful of time, and I want to pass things over to our political director, Doug Murray, to close us out.
Yeah, I'll be real brief. I just want to, Jabari, I totally agree. I think this was a great conversation. I noted a lot of points on bipartisan consensus, which I think is exciting. I hope that the businesses that attended and participated got something out of this and saw that these legislators can agree on things and work towards compromise. So that's great. So I'll close it off there. Thank you so much, Representative Conklin and Representative Grove, for your thoughtful discussion. Thank you, Jeff and Jabari. I wish everyone a good afternoon.